the Page Publishing Book Club. How you doing? I'm Alice Stockton Rossini. Patrice Miller worked in HR for over 20 years, and she was retired less than a week when she decided to publish, are you ready? The top 5 things to consider before filing an employee relations complaint and how to file an effective complaint. Wow, that's some title. So obviously you saw a need.
Yes, I did. I had responded to numerous complaints and seen how they filed the complaint and they weren't substantiated. I thought, maybe we can provide a template on filing an effective complaint. What does an ineffective complaint look like to help people file an effective complaint, if that makes sense?
What's the most common mistake?
When people file their complaints, they're angry and they've had it. It's been stewing for a long time. Oftentimes they're not articulating what the complaint is. They're venting. And oftentimes if we can calm them down, it's okay. But oftentimes there's a lot of things that get missed when they allow for it to stew. You have to keep your wits about you, taking a step back to see what's really going on in my situation. And does this lie to a policy violation or illegal activity? Because oftentimes it does not, until they're upset because they're like, yes, this is harassment. You're like, well, no, it's not. It might be inappropriate behavior. So just helping them understand that. There's a standard legally for harassment discrimination, and oftentimes it does not reach that bar. And oftentimes with companies where they have policy violations of misconduct based on their employee handbook, oftentimes it doesn't reach that. So it's really kind of educating yourself on what really is a company policy violation or illegal activity. Also, how will filing my complaint affect me in my future career? And employment law attorneys probably don't like that question so much, but it's really more about when the complaint you're filing is not necessarily rising to any policy violation and you're filing numerous complaints, oftentimes that does impact you negatively, even though no one's telling you that. The biggest mistake I've run across is where someone's keeping documentation for about 10 years.
What?
Something happens recently and they have all this, documentation and 30 pages, and it's like, okay, so what's happened recently? Because you're probably not going to read through all of that. And so it's to help people understand the most recent things are the most critical things, and the who, what, why, where, how are the most critical things, so that people can help with resolving that specific issue. I'm trying to help people and how to speak up effectively, but oftentimes there are some individuals who are challenged with resolving some conflict. I don't mean harassment and I don't mean discrimination. I mean, I don't get along with you. I don't like how you look at me in the morning, or you don't speak to me in the morning. And believe it or not, people file complaints about that. You're not resolving your own employee conflict and you're constantly expecting someone else to resolve them for you. It probably doesn't look quite as... And so there were so many of them coming in and so many unresolved conflicts after an investigation. People would just basically go back to work and not be satisfied because they were told their complaint was not substantiated. So that was really the driver. And let me help you speak up effectively.
This is important information. And I guess you had to wait till you retired to put it out there. I would think you'd be a featured speaker at any number of...
That's my plan. That's why I'm moving into retirement, so that I could spend more time doing stuff like that.
Man, Patrice, you're actually doing a public service out there. Thank you. David Arnett enjoys writing mostly at his cottage on Norway's North Sea. He wrote his first story when he was 7, spent a lifetime traveling around the world as an Army brat, and later a Foreign Service officer. He has a PhD in English, and that's coming in handy now that he's published The Sea of Cortez. So your travels have played into your writing.
Indirectly, yes. Much of the book takes place in Colombia, and part of it back in Washington, D.C. I had Washington, D.C. assignments as a Foreign Service officer. Much of it takes place in Colombia, to the Sea of Cortez. It's about a young man. He's 24 years old. He's gone to the University of Arizona. His parents died in a car accident, which turns out not to have been an accident. There's an attempted kidnapping. So he's walking off to where he works as a bank teller, and a van pulls up. 3 burly men hop out and try to throw him into the van. He fights them off because he's been a wrestler in school. Then there's a second attempt and the police are saying that they can't figure out why these men would try to catch him unless he's somehow involved with the drug trade. Turns out there's an anti-narcotics task force in Tucson, and they convince him that he should allow himself to be kidnapped because they have traced the planner of all this to his great uncle. He didn't even know he had a great uncle. His family he thought was from Mexico. It turns out the origin was in Colombia, and that the most evil and murderous drug lord in Colombia is, in fact, his great uncle, and he's led to believe that the uncle wants to train him and eventually turn over his cocaine empire to him because he's the only surviving relative. Well, nothing turns out the way he expects it to. He ends up having to fight for his life, and that's kind of the basic outline of the story, but there's much more to it. My last assignment in the Foreign Service, I was the head of the American Consulate General in Istanbul, and an American film producer came there. He was making a film, and we've stayed in touch. I sent him a copy of the book, so we'll see what happens.
Nice.
As a matter of fact, I have done a book signing. I've got several more planned. The first was in Flagstaff at the Barnes & Noble store. They were happy I contacted them, and they said, yeah, we'll set up a table at the entrance, and I brought a big poster and bookmarks and settling sheet. Anyway, I did far better than they anticipated. Sold 13 of the books for them in less than 2 hours, and they were telling me that no one had ever sold more than 12, so I was feeling good about that. And now I've set up another Barnes & Noble store in Tucson. I'll be signing books there. And then there's something called Authorpalooza in Phoenix. And I'm one of 8 authors that will be available to answer questions and then to sell books there. So I'm, doing what I can to encourage sales, and there has just been a very nice article on me in the Sedona Monthly magazine, which is distributed nationally. And then the local newspaper, the Red Rock News, published a very fine story. And unbeknownst to me, the ownership has 3 other papers in the Verde Valley where Sedona is located, and they ran the story in those 3 papers too. So
wow.
I'm getting publicity, and I'm grateful for this interview.
Now, did you call the newspaper? Did you call the
Yes.
Barnes & Noble? Yes. Why
I
so
did
many
indeed.
authors are so reluctant to do that? And look
Well,
at
you really have to sell yourself and your work these days. And I've been working at it. As I indicated, I've been having some successes, and I hope I can keep it up.
Me too, David. I mean, you're the whole package. Got a solid story and a great attitude about taking action to get your book noticed. Thank you. Eileen Kent is a retired radio and newspaper reporter from Connecticut who had a burning desire to write something for her grandkids. She wanted to share what it was like growing up in the 50s and show how different it was from the world today's kids are growing up in. The name of her book, Carry On in Laughter. Different how, Eileen?
Like when we hung out on the streets in the 50s. We devised our own games. We had no parental supervision. It was just fun, creative fun. We used a broom for a stickball. We turned the water hydrant on and put our bathing suits on and splashed in it in the streets. When I look back and I say, I feel a little badly for the kids today because they're so supervised by parents, and it's just a different world. A lot of it was sad in a way because when I was 6 years old, I lost my dad, and my mom never talked about it to my sisters and I, because in the 50s and 60s, that's how you treated a beloved person who died. You didn't talk about it. My mother was wonderful, but you didn't talk about it.
Right.
But it was a pivotal part of my life because it was our hidden secret. My sisters and I were too embarrassed to talk about it. It was almost like a shame in a way, and my father was wonderful. We loved him. We absolutely loved him. So the first part of the stories are my growing up.
Okay.
Then I went on to some stories when I grew up. 18 stories, 5 fictional and 13 memoir types.
Nice.
Yeah. Yeah. It really is, and I'm so happy that my grandkids will get to see what it was like for me, and get that feeling. I mean, we had a pet mouse that we kept in a nearby basement, and it became our treasured pet. We snuck food out from our apartments to feed and care for it, but we hid it from our parents, and we kept it in a shoebox, and it was our pet. That was our pet. Yeah. Then we read Archie comics sitting on the stoop. Summers we went away to Rockaway, and we sifted sand and played in the surf. I mean, it was just wonderful, really wonderful. And then kind of like a change, because we went to high school, and we lived in Upper Manhattan, and we went to high school in Greenwich Village, and it was creating a new life. And we left our neighborhood. We took a train every day, and we just thought we were so sophisticated. I mean, it was like it was a different life, and it was a lot of fun. It really was. I like to do things that really happened and just add fictional stories to it, because the fictional stories came from courses that I took, that I added to it. But I wanted to tell you one thing, because it's kind of funny. My sisters and I shared a place in the Hamptons, and we enjoyed so many family reunions. But my son-in-law christened us the Ducks, because he said we were always quacking away. And we were. We were.
All right, Eileen. Well, get quacking on those book signings, all right? And you'll be on your way. A part-time bereavement coordinator for a volunteer hospice center in Maine, Donald Green is an environmentalist at heart. And yes, that's his real name. He's always written essays and poetry. And now he's published a children's book with a call to action. It is entitled The Dragonfly and Me.
I was sitting in my backyard up in Maine, looking up, and there's dragonflies buzzing all over the place. And all of a sudden, this green-tailed dragonfly landed on my knee. He turned and looked, and then he took off. And I said, "Oh, gee, that was cute." And then bang, he was right back, and he had a bug. And he ate the bug from the back to the front, and the wings fell off as he was eating it. And he took off and came right back again with another bug. I was fascinated with this. That little incident, and then had an idea, of elves and the gnomes and all that. And then I kind of tied that in with the environment and trying to translate that into something that I could give to my children and grandchildren. And so I started writing this little fanciful tale. It turned out to be The Dragonfly and Me.
It's a story about the ecology, and the individual who's reading it is the primary character. And I wrote the story with no personal pronouns, so there's no he or she. So whoever's reading it can be the person in the story. And Grolin is a little wood gnome who takes care of a particular part of the forest, and those parts are called keeps. So I get called into the forest, and as I'm walking into the forest, this magical thing happens to me where I shrink down to the same size as Grolin. Now I become part of the forest, and I also get to see things differently. So in meeting Grolin and then his wife Gretchen and their little house, which is inside of a big old spruce tree, Sprucea, and Sprucea is alive and has given permission for Grolin and his wife to live there. And Grolin introduces his friends in the forest. Sylvia, which is a spider who, it's kind of like the internet. There's all this information that she can get from her web. And Makui, who is kind of this cross between a hippopotamus and a frog and lives in the mud by the stream, and introduces the reader to the water and how that's being polluted by man's taking nature for granted. And Baron is the master keeper. The reader is then invited to become a keeper and to assume responsibilities in taking care of nature. and translate that into doing something in their environment with their friends in school. And basically it builds up the young person to take responsibility and to do something about the environment as well. I started to do book signings at the local library in Machias there. I'm going to be doing readings in the local libraries here in Down East Maine. I've been in touch with BAM Books A Million in Bangor and the Bangor Public Library, and we target different areas every other week through Facebook. My primary thing, and get this done and published, get it out to, particularly to young people, because that's who's going to be growing up in this environment and, global warming, environmental change, and so forth. And they really need to understand on a very simple level how they can be effective in doing something.
I love it, Donald. Anything that can get us moving to clean up our environment. Okay, we really have to take a quick break, but we're coming back right after this.
Attention all authors. Page Publishing is looking for authors. Have you written a book and want to get it published? Page Publishing will get your book into bookstores and for sale online at Amazon, Apple iTunes, and other outlets. They handle all aspects of the publishing process for you: printing, cover art, publicity, copyright, and editing. Call 800-204-6099 now for your free author submission kit. That's 800-204-6099 for your free author submission kit.
Okay, we are back on the Page Publishing Book Club. I'm Alice Stockton Rossini. Jared Jackson has written 40 books and finally published his first one. It's a children's book entitled, Where Does the Man in the Moon Go During the Day? Jared does all of his illustrations, which is truly amazing considering he's partially blind. How do you do it, Jared?
Well, number one, I got through school utilizing just black Sharpie markers on white paper because I can see contrasting colors really well in bold print. What is very unique about my vision is because my depth perception is so poor, things look a whole lot more flat. So my vision kind of reverse engineers what Pixar did with flat illustrations. They took flat stuff and made it more in depth, more 3D, whereas my vision takes the 3D that everyone else sees and makes it more flat. So it's kind of easier for me to understand how to illustrate things that way.
That's very interesting. So where does the man on the moon go during the day?
The book started as a high school English assignment. And after much debate and help from my mother and my brother Aaron, what we came up with was trying to answer a question that a child might have. I wrote the book, illustrated the book, and got to read it to some second and third graders back then, and they all said the same thing. Oh, it's really good, but it's not long enough. Read it again. Well, it went on the shelf for many years, and after so much of my sister, Leah, and my mom telling me, you need to get that book published. It's way too cute to just leave on the shelf. I finally went through the process of getting it published. Basically, it starts off with, while Mr. Sun fills the sky with his light, where does the man in the moon go all day? And then throughout the first 20-some pages of the book, it asks, does he do this or that or this or that or this or that? It's basically a bunch of prompts to get children to think about what is he doing? Is he playing sports or doing chores or hanging out with his space buddies or traveling the world? And then at the end of it, I answered the question of where does he go during the day? And the whole book rhymes. It's very educational on multiple levels, including, everything, science, of course, history, art, music, sports, and there's tons of humor, cute little characters, colorful illustrations, and children love it. As a substitute teacher, I read it in front of some of my classes whenever I was allowed to, and I've done some story times as well at libraries and at book fairs, and it tickles me at how many adults will pick it up and read it and buy it because they love the illustrations, they love the humor in it. I grew up with Looney Tunes cartoons and Disney movies and Peanuts Gang and Garfield and Friends that I based a lot of my illustration style upon. Happy, big, colorful illustrations, happy eyes, things like that. And there's a whole lot of in-depth humor in it that young children won't necessarily get. It's nothing vulgar or anything like that, but I've intentionally put in there little puns to have some sort of entertainment for the adults or teenagers or older children who are reading it to a small kid. I'm on Facebook, and I've been to many different book signings. I'm a member of the Authors Guild of Tennessee, so I have a pretty wide fan base even across the country.
Nice work, Jared, getting the word out. Only 39 more books to go. Thank you. Devin Reid is an anthropology student at university. He's a chef, an artist, but says writing relaxes him. He's been writing since he was in high school, and when he had to tackle a creative writing assignment his senior year, the wheels started turning, and now he's published The Will of My Father.
It's on the hinge of like World War III, from political point of view to natural disasters. Everything kind of just collides, and this young guy who lives in a city of millions has to suffer the consequences of the world ending, essentially. And so he deals with love and loss, of course, because his whole family goes down, in nuclear war, and he ends up realizing he's one of the few that's left alive to start humanity all over again, and he has no idea how to do it, So he ends up finding another survivor, and the survivor tells him of a place that is safe for humanity to start again. And so that he decides, I have nothing else to lose. I've lost, the only love of my life and my unborn child. So he gets on a plane with this guy. He has no idea who he is other than where he found him. They get on this plane, and they try to fly it on their own. It ends up being a disaster. They end up crashing in mid-flight. They crash in the middle of the ocean. He wakes up, and he ends up in this world where he thinks is supposed to be where he's supposed to be. But I leave that mystery to the readers. If it's, on Earth, if it's on another planet, like, it's just all for the reader to figure out. That's the mystery of the story, I think, is like, where is he exactly? Because he experiences some like weird phenomenon, time shifts, kind of like sci-fi stuff, fantasy.
What was the inspiration for this?
I don't really know, to be honest. It was just something that just came out of me. I mean, once I finished, like, I was writing a large chunk of it a couple years ago now, and I was working like 80 hours a week at work. I was managing a restaurant, and I was just stressed to the brim. And so I essentially just became a robot. And after work, I would literally just write till like 3 or 4 in the morning, and then wake up 4 hours later and go to work. Like, that was my routine for like almost a year.
Wow.
And I think just moments of intense stress, like, our mind kind of just finds a way to have that outlet. Like you said, we got to find those things. And this story just came out of me. I don't know. It's just totally fantasy fiction, just boom. So it's a 3-part series. So yeah, I'm just finishing up book 2. I actually took this semester of school off to finish book 2. So I've written like 126 pages in like 5 weeks now. So after book 3, like, I figured, I'll take a break from writing. Like, that's what I kind of want to do, and jump into something else maybe. So I talked to Barnes & Noble here in my city, Lincoln, and they've ordered some books from the publisher, and they're holding some on the shelves and stuff. And from what I heard, a few of them are going and selling, and Amazon's a big marketplace. I've had so many friends contact me, be like, hey, I found your book on Amazon. I already bought it. I'm like, awesome. Barnes & Noble's big. Yeah, so those 2 platforms are big.
And just the significance of the title, The Will of My Father.
Yeah, kind of. I think it's when people read book 2, they really understand the significance of it. Well, book 1 pretty much signifies like the title, but yeah, it really dives into like who he is, what his past, and the significance of his past, and who he is. Like, brings up that name, and that title. It becomes a big thing later on in the book series. So yeah, I was thinking really far ahead when I came with the title, and man, it took me a long time to come up with the title.
Well, I hear it gets easier the more you write. Thanks, Devin. Finally, Thomas Wilson is a Vietnam vet from East Texas. He's been preaching the gospel for almost 50 years, so quotes are what he does. And now he's publishing the first of several volumes of quotes, this one entitled 1001 Bits of Wit.
That simply means that I put 1,001 of the quotes that I saved over the years from when I came out of high school. I just started to write things down as I would think of them. And I saved them for over 40 years. And I had this friend in Houston, and she and some other friends would call me, and they'd be asking me a lot of Bible questions. And I'd give them some scriptures for them to consider and study and And then I would give them one of my quotes. So this young lady, she said, Brother Wilson, why don't you put those quotes in a book? So, me being a Marine, I told her, I said, young lady, are you challenging a Marine? She said, I sure am, Marine. The rest is history. I want you to just give me a number between 1 and 1,001, and I'll give you some examples of some of the quotes that you can find in this book.
62.
Experience minus common sense spells disaster. Now that's in, 1,001 bits of wit.
12.
Number 12, love never grows old. Did you hear me?
I got it.
Love never grows old. Can you give me one more?
957.
Number 957. When a winner competes, he cannot count beyond the number 1. Why? Because a winner wants to be what? Number 1, right?
Yeah.
You like that, huh?
I'm amazed that you came up with so many quotes. And you
Really?
Yeah. And they're
Okay,
nobody else's quotes. They're your quotes.
Yeah, they're mine. They're mine. They're personal.
That's a lot of
and
quotes,
I mean,
sir.
I've been writing them down. I just wrote some more down this morning. Like lazy folks never run out of excuses, stuff like that.
That's so true. Isn't that
Yeah.
annoying? So I'm just wondering, so it's a book and you carry this book around and you day by day read the quotes, or are there chapters where I can say, oh, I'm feeling depressed, my career stinks, or my love life stinks, and is it split up that way?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I did, divide them into chapters depending on what I thought the quotes would, coincide with the thoughts of a person. Like chapter 1 would be general maxims. Chapter 2 would be after dinner thoughts. Chapter 3 would be family encouragement. Chapter 4 would be friend to friend. Chapter 5 would be patriotic and religious. Chapter 6 would be thoughts to ponder. Chapter 7, health and inspiration. Chapter 8, despair and depression. Chapter 9, athletes and workplace. And chapter 10, of course, just self-examination. So they're divided, with 100 different quotes, of course, and plus 1.
All right, Reverend, and there's 1,001 more coming after this. We are out of time. Thanks so much for being here. Don't forget, you can download the podcast at 710WOR.com. For the Page Publishing Book Club, I'm Alice Stockton Rossini.